The emergency room doors burst open at 2:47 a.m., and what walked through them would haunt the night shift nurses for years to come. A woman barely conscious, her face swollen beyond recognition, stumbled forward before collapsing into the arms of a paramedic. Her clothes were torn, blood seeping through the fabric, and her trembling hands clutched a broken cell phone like it was the only thing tethering her to this world. Behind her, the wail of sirens pierced the darkness, but it was the silence in her eyes that spoke the loudest, a silence that screamed of unspeakable violence, of humanity at its worst. Nobody knew yet that this battered woman was Sarah Mitchell, and nobody could have predicted that her assault would unleash a reckoning that would shake their small town to its very foundation. 3 days earlier, Sarah had been living what most would call an ordinary life, though ordinary is a relative term when your husband is the vice president of the Iron Riders Motorcycle Club. Jake Mitchell wasn't the stereotype people imagined when they heard biker. Sure, he wore leather and rode a Harley that rumbled like thunder, but he also coached Little League on Saturdays and helped elderly neighbors with their yard work. The club itself had transformed over the years from its rough and tumble origins into something more complex. A brotherhood that raised money for children's hospitals, escorted abuse victims to court, and protected their community in ways the law sometimes couldn't. Sarah taught 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary, where her students adored her gentle nature and infectious laugh. She'd met Jake at a charity event 7 years ago, and despite her initial reservations about the leather vest and the patches that marked him as part of a world she didn't understand, she'd fallen for the man beneath it all. He was kind in quiet ways, protective without being controlling, and he loved her with a fierce tenderness that made her feel like the most precious thing in his universe. That Tuesday evening, Sarah stayed late grading papers, something she did every week without fail. The school parking lot had emptied hours ago, leaving just her modest sedan under the flickering streetlight. She didn't notice the 3 men watching from the shadows across the street, didn't see them exchange glances and nods as they recognized the Iron Rider sticker on her bumper. These weren't random thugs. They were members of a rival crew called the Scorpions, and they'd been waiting for an opportunity like this for months. The rivalry had started over territory, over respect, over all the petty reasons that men sometimes convince themselves are worth violence. But the Iron Riders had drawn a line in the sand months ago. No retaliation, no escalation, just strategic distance and careful peace. Jake had been one of the strongest voices urging restraint, arguing that their club had evolved beyond street justice, that they had families and futures to protect. The Scorpions saw this restraint as weakness. When Sarah finally walked to her car, arms full of papers and a coffee mug balanced precariously on top, she heard footsteps behind her. The attack was brutal and swift. They wanted to send a message, they said, laughing as they told her to, pass it along to her tough guy husband. They wanted the Iron Riders to know that kindness was liability, that mercy was for the weak. Sarah fought back with everything she had, but 3 against 1 left her broken on the pavement, her papers scattered like fallen leaves around her unconscious body. A janitor found her 20 minutes later and called 911, probably saving her life. At the hospital after the surgeons had done what they could, and Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness. Jake sat beside her bed with tears streaming down his face. His brothers from the club filled the waiting room, their presence a wall of leather and barely contained rage. Every single one of them wanted blood. Every single one of them wanted to find those men and deliver the kind of justice that left no room for mercy. "We ride tonight," one of them said, his voice cold as winter. "We end this." But Jake shook his head, his hand never leaving Sarah's. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw but steady. "No, we do this differently." What happened next became the stuff of legend in their community, a story that would be retold in bars and diners for years to come. Instead of hunting down the Scorpions with violence, Jake made phone calls. He called every member of the Iron Riders, every ally they'd made over the years through their charity work, every business owner they'd helped, every family they'd protected. Within 6 hours, he'd mobilized something more powerful than any army. He'd mobilized a community. By sunrise, the town square was filled with people, mothers whose children Sarah had taught, Veterans the club had supported, domestic violence survivors the Iron Riders had escorted to safety, small business owners who'd received help when they needed it most. They came with signs and voices, demanding justice not through violence but through visibility. Local news crews showed up, then regional ones. Social media exploded with Sarah's story, with the contrast between the senseless violence of the Scorpions and the measured response of the Iron Riders. The club set up a legal fund for Sarah's medical bills within hours, and donations poured in from across the country. Jake organized a town hall meeting where he spoke about breaking cycles of violence, about how real strength meant choosing humanity over revenge. He shared security footage from the school parking lot, footage the Scorpions didn't know existed, and turned it over to the police, rather than using it himself. The 3 attackers were identified within 48 hours. But before the police could make arrests, something unexpected happened. The Scorpions' own community turned against them. Parents, siblings, even other members of their crew came forward, disgusted by the cowardly attack on an innocent woman. The code of the streets had rules, warped as they might be, and beating a schoolteacher in a parking lot violated every single one of them. When the arrests finally came, it wasn't just law enforcement involved. It was a collective rejection of that kind of brutality. The district attorney, moved by the community response and the evidence Jake had provided, pursued maximum charges. The Scorpions' leadership publicly denounced the attack and disbanded their crew entirely, unable to recover from the shame and the spotlight. Sarah spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Her physical recovery was slow and painful, requiring multiple surgeries and months of physical therapy. But something extraordinary happened during that time. Her hospital room became a shrine to human goodness. Students sent thousands of drawings and cards. Strangers from across the country sent flowers and letters. The Iron Riders organized a blood drive that saved 17 lives beyond. Sarah's local businesses created a scholarship fund in her name for future teachers. The emotional wounds ran deeper than the physical ones, though. Sarah had nightmares, struggled with anxiety, and battled the kind of trauma that doesn't show up on X-rays. But she also witnessed something that changed her: fundamental understanding of the world. She saw her husband and his brothers, men society often judged by their appearance and their patches, choose a harder path than revenge. She saw them model the kind of courage that doesn't involve fists or weapons but requires standing up in courtrooms, speaking at community forums, and proving that reform and redemption are possible. 6 months later, Sarah returned to her classroom. Her students threw a welcome back party that made her cry happy tears for the first time since the attack. Jake and several club members attended, these big bearded men sitting awkwardly in tiny chairs, beaming with pride as third graders read poems they'd written about courage and kindness. The story could have ended in bloodshed and escalating violence. Instead, it became a testament to a different kind of strength, the strength to respond to darkness with light, to meet cruelty with community, and to prove that the measure of humanity isn't in how we fall, but in how we choose to rise. The Iron Riders didn't just defend one of their own. They defended the principle that we're all connected, that an attack on a schoolteacher is an attack on everyone, and that real power lies not in domination, but in lifting each other up. Sarah still has scars, both visible and invisible, but she also has something else: an unshakable faith in the goodness that exists even in unexpected places, and the knowledge that sometimes the toughest people in the room are the ones brave enough to choose compassion over vengeance.